I was a lawyer for 24 years with Hardenberg, Readerstone, and Gowell. I was a judge for 18 years as an elected official. It was a wonderful career. I was a lucky man. Just briefly, biography. Some people want to know a little bit about me. I was born in Akron, Ohio, 1946. My mother was a homemaker. My father was an accountant.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to our season finale of the McMinnville City Club's 2019-2020. Oh, sorry, that was looking ahead next year. 2018-2019 season. Thank you all for being here. A couple of housekeeping notes. First, I want to go over our sponsors, of whom without we wouldn't be able to put on these wonderful programs each month. Our gold sponsors are Cellar Ridge Construction, J.L. Kiff Vineyard, Chemeketa Community College, Columbia Bank, McMinnville Area Chamber of Commerce, On Point Community Credit Union, First Federal Savings, Gormley Plumbing and Mechanical, and Larson Motors, now Lum Motors. Our silver sponsors are First American Title Insurance, Payne West Insurance, and the News Register, and our cultural trust sponsors are Stephen Rupp, Philip and Phoebe Newman, and Dan and Mary Corrigan. Thank you so much to all of our sponsors of this year. And if any of you out there, whether it's a office business or individual, would like to be a sponsor for next year, please contact Cassie over there, and our contact information is on our website as well, which will soon be updated with our 2019-2020 program that we have some of these on here. I just wanted to go over it for you. So our seasons are September through June, and we take the month of December off. So and it's really weird to be scheduling out in 2020. I don't know if you guys have been scheduling things for 2020. It's just an odd thing in my head to go with the year 2020 on certain dates. But in September we have Edward Niedermeyer. Did anybody by chance see Edward Niedermeyer's pub chat a couple years ago when he was in town? We have a couple. He came and he spoke on the future about cars. He's I know him from college. He's a nationally renowned auto journalist. He was editor of a website called The Truth About Cars. He writes for Bloomberg all the time. And he has a new book coming out called Ludicrous, The Unvarnished Story of Tesla Motors. He has been the #1 critic of Tesla Motors for many years now, not against kind of their goals and missions, but just about how they do things and maybe make things a little rosier than it seems. So he'll be speaking about that, and then he'll tie in a lot about the future about cars, autonomous cars, all of that. After that, we'll have William L. Sullivan back, who is one of the best storytellers in the state. He's a hiker and a speaker and a writer on many different topics. He was here last year speaking about folk heroes of Oregon, and he's going to be back in October speaking about cults in Oregon, from ghost dancers to the Rajneeshis. After that, November, Stephen Rupp, our head of our local public art committee, has set us up with Lee Kelly and Travis Stewart. They're two artists that are responsible for the statues going in the roundabouts out on Hill Road. And so they'll both be here giving their perspective on art in public. Then we will skip December. In January, we'll have Heather Richards, local planning director, and need to confirm it, but we're pretty sure we'll get Jim Johnson from the Oregon Department of Ag speaking together from their individual perspectives and points of views on land use, growth, and development. In February, we'll have former U.S. Representative Les Aucoin, who is coming out with a book called Catch and Release in Oregon Life and Politics. It was fun. I just talked to him. I got to catch up on his narrow defeat to my grandfather in that race. In March, we'll have Ginger McCall, who's the a new position in Oregon, is the Public Records Ombudsman. So she's the first Oregon Public Records Ombudsman. She was out of Linfield for a small class a couple weeks ago, and that will be good. She'll be speaking on the state of public records in Oregon and beyond. In April, we kept that open because that could be a election item. It could be a different debate on a different topic. We wanted to leave that open depending upon what the climate is leading up to the spring elections. In May, we'll have Matthew D. LaPlante. He's a former News Register reporter. Some of you may remember him. He was a courts reporter for a while. and he went on to be a professor at Utah State. He has a new book called Superlative, The Biology of Extremes, and it's all about, in nature, the most extreme animals that for a long time they would kind of ignore and think they're just outliers, but now they're learning there's a lot to learn from those extremes about our own biology. And he has a new book that just came out that's wonderful. I'd recommend picking that up, reading it either before or after he comes. And we'll finish off the year with David Harrelson, the manager of the Cultural Resources Department at the Confederated Tribes of the Grand Ronde, and he'll be speaking about the Yamhill Kalapuya from a tribal perspective. So we're very excited. Make sure and if you are City Club members, re-up. If you're not, it's just I think $30 or $35 for the whole season, and hope to see you here next year as well as today. With that, without much further ado, so that we give him proper time, I'm just going to introduce right away who you're all here to see, Judge Ronald Stone.
Good afternoon. I have a smile on my face because I'm retired. All right, folks, the topic today is on justice, reflections on a career. So the first thing I want to do is give a definition of justice. And when I was talking to my daughter about this, she said, now don't get too philosophical. What's that, ma'am? Oh, closer to the mic. Can you hear me now? 1, 2, 3, can you hear me now? All right. I'm not the judge anymore. No, I want you to hear. Ma'am, if you can't hear, just raise your hand and I will talk louder, okay? All right. Definition of justice. When I talked to my daughter about this, she said, Dad, don't spend a lot of time on that. She said it's too philosophical and their eyes are going to start rolling behind their heads. But I'll give it a quick definition because I'm a lawyer and words are important. And so a definition of justice. This is my definition, by the way. It's not what justice is. It's a definition of the abstract concept of justice. Justice is the fair fulfillment of either fulfillment or the vindication of morality, law, or revealed truth. In my career, I dealt with the law and the fulfillment and the vindication of the law. I was a lawyer for 24 years with Hogberg, Ruderstone, and Gowell. I was a judge for 18 years as an elected official. It was a wonderful career. I was a lucky man. Just briefly, biography. Some people want to know a little bit about me. I was born in Akron, Ohio, 1946. My mother was a homemaker. My father was an accountant. I lived and was brought up in a little 1,000 square foot Cape Cod house, which was built for the GIs when they came home from World War II. I joined the service for 4 years. I was a school teacher. I worked for Republic Steel with a jackhammer, one of the worst jobs I ever had. Made car mats for the Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company, also a horrible job, all motivating me to go back to college, which I did. I went to University of Akron Law School, graduated in 1977, immediately came here to Oregon. I knew this was the place I wanted to live. Practice of law. I'm proud to be a lawyer. When people tell me a lawyer's joke, I don't laugh. By the way, I should say, I've never heard a judge joke, but I'm sure they're out there. But I just didn't find them funny. Honestly, lawyers are the most honorable, truthful, hardworking people I know. If a lawyer, and I know there'll be some questions about this probably, but lawyers, if they lie, they lose their job. And it's an honor among all of us lawyers. And the lawyers here know what I'm talking about. It's an honorable profession. The biggest change I've seen in the law biz is women. When I got here, there was one woman lawyer. In law school, out of 100 people, I was in a class of 100 people, 40 were women. In the class before me at law school, there were 5. And the momentum has continued. And the business of law has benefited tremendously, in my opinion. When I got here, it was men ran the show. And it was a kind of a male, I don't know how to describe it. It was just a very male-oriented thing. And to give you one example, one of my first cases was with a very senior lawyer. I don't know if I should say his name or not. He's now deceased. And he was trying to bully me in court. Now, honestly, I first of all, it shocked me. Second of all, of course, I wouldn't put up with that for a second. We almost got in a fight. Judge Devlin had to break it up. That would be unheard of now. Just absolutely unheard of. The practice of law is much more civil now, and I credit, quite frankly, I don't know how that sounds, but I will credit women to a great extent for that. We now have half the judges in Yamhill County are women. So 4 judges, 2 women, 2 men. So that's one of the main things. I remember it was a huge debate whether women could wear pants in the courtroom or not. Serious debate. You know, threatening of contempt if they didn't wear a dress. The other major change is computers. And folks, we're much more efficient than we ever were before the computers. John Collins I'll give him tremendous credit for that. Honestly, folks, when I was a baby judge, they bring in files, and I have to sign, and you have to find the right page, and now it's all boom, read, boom, boom. We're much, much, much more efficient because of it. During a trial, now I could look up a case, I can look up the file immediately, I can look up any pleadings. When I started, it was files, thick files. The other change is we are much more now in tune with rehabilitation as opposed to punishment. Now, don't get me wrong, part of the law will always be some punishment because, quite frankly, and I'll talk about this a little more later, but quite frankly, sometimes that's the only reasonable alternative. We have treatment courts. We have a drug court. We have 2 drug courts. We have a mental health court. Many counties have other courts for veterans and DUII. Those were just unheard of when I started practicing law. The practice I did for 24 years, I did everything. It could not have been a better training. Marsh, the twins, Frank and Jean Marsh hired me. They were in their 80s, I think, when they hired me. They were on their way out. But the practice of law, we just did everything from criminal law, civil law, torts, divorces, big business practice, property law and all its natures and kind. We did it all, bankruptcy. And for a young lawyer, it was a tremendous experience. The only bad thing, and it's not really bad because I loved them, from time to time they call me boy. I didn't care. They were tremendous men, and I'll never forget them. The other change in the law now I see is specialization. More lawyers are specializing as opposed to the kind of law that I did. And that's probably a good thing. They're probably more efficient. But all lawyers, whether they are specialists or not, have to be prepared. And I certainly was, and most of my colleagues were as well. I've been a judge for 18 years. The biggest thing I want to talk about there a little bit, I had to go through an election, as all my colleagues have had to do. Did I like that? No. It was really, really very difficult. I had a primary. I think there was 8 people running. I lost. I came in second, so there was a runoff. And then in November, I had another election. So, I was campaigning almost a whole year and trying to practice law at the same time and spend money. But I'll just answer this question because people always ask me this. Yes, I think judges should be elected. I was in New Zealand a couple years ago, and I just had to stop by at a courthouse to see how they how they ran the show. And you know, first of all, they had these wigs on. I couldn't get over that. And one of the first questions they asked me was, "Mr. Stone, do you have to be elected?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "In Yamhill County, Oregon, we elect the sheriff, we elect the DA, and we elect our judges." "Well, we're appointed by the Prime Minister for life." I said, "Oh, okay." I mean, like, what am I supposed to say? I don't know. Folks, I really, really, really believe it is uncomfortable as it is. It's just the right thing. The people should not give up that power to elect a judge. So I just say that to you. I very much believe in elections for judges, and it should continue. The next thing I want to say is the system works. Folks, it works. We're lucky to live here in Yamhill County. We have a history of good government. Good county commissioners, an excellent DA. He's sitting right here. There he is, an excellent DA. My colleagues on the bench, second to none. Folks, we're lucky. A sheriff, in my opinion, a very good sheriff as well. As a judge, my job was pretty much 8 to 5. If you're trying a case, sometimes you would have to stay later. I worked real hard. And I had to make decisions. Lots of decisions every day. Decisions regarding custody, criminal matters, civil matters, guardianships, all the things that a circuit court judge does. And so that really is, to be a judge, you have to be able to make decisions. Another reason why, not just here, but generally speaking, I'm a huge believer in the jury system. Folks, it is unique in the world. There are few countries in the world that have juries. We got it from the Brits. And when you ask them, when I was over there, I'd ask them, and they'd say, "Oh, well, juries, we've had them from time immemorial." Well, I've researched it, and, well, there is some, beginning and ends. The Greeks had juries. The Romans did not. And a fair portion of our common law comes from the Romans. So they don't know where really, or how, or why it started. It is a powerful tool for our citizenship. Folks, there is no appeal from an acquittal. I mean, Bradbury's probably going to sit in his seat here and wiggle a little bit, because if there's a mistrial, but generally speaking, there is no acquittal. A jury decides the most fundamental, both in criminal and civil issues. What juries do, they decide the facts, what's true from what's false. Judges give them the law. Those are jury instructions. And folks, in my opinion, there is no one better qualified than our good citizens to bring their good common sense into the jury room and decide what happened. No appointed judge, no appointed official is any better at that than our citizens. And in my experience, they really work hard. Do I always agree with the jury? No, but I almost always did. If you get picked for the jury, don't all get all upset. In my opinion, short of being in the military, it's our highest civic duty to sit on a jury. It was so important to our forefathers that it's in our Constitution, 2 or 3 different places, in our Declaration of Independence. King George was fiddling with our juries, and that's one reason why we had a Revolutionary War. he was sending magistrates over. He was ignoring what a jury said. So folks, let me tell you, it is a wonderful thing that we have. The only countries that I know of that have juries are common law countries. Countries where the Brits, at one time or another, either through colonial power or influence, do they have juries. Most countries of the world would never, ever trust its citizens to have that power of acquittal with no appeal. The only appeals you hear about on the paper and read about are mistakes judges make, generally speaking. Not because of an acquittal. I guess I keep repeating myself here. But what do courts do? This is a huge thing, and people just don't even think about it. You know, when you go home and you turn the faucet on, the water comes on, and you plug something in and electricity goes on, that's not an accident. It's because of contracts, because courts enforce contracts. And folks, we practically do it for free. For a small filing fee, the courts, will enforce almost any contract you enter into with some other person. And, in my opinion, that's one reason why we have a robust economy and one of the highest standard of livings in the world. These contracts aren't commands from the government. They are voluntary associations that can be enforced by the court. So, courts do that. Also, family law, and a lot of you probably are thinking about that. And one of the most difficult things for me, and I know my colleagues, is when it comes to custody or anything to do with children. It's difficult, but it's just part of the job. One of the nicest things I did as a judge is marriages and adoptions. I didn't like divorces particularly. You know, I would always think, whenever I did a marriage, I would look in their eyes as they were saying these vows. And folks, it's like looking into eternity, that look. And then 10 years later, they won't even face each other. Sometimes I would remind them, if they were fighting over kids, remember your marriage day? Remember the vows? You have a child? Other things we do, of course, criminal law. Everyone knows about criminal law, thinks about it, read about it in the newspaper. We do a good job of that. And, as a judge, and I know I'm speaking for my colleagues as well, I wanted the biggest bang for my buck. When I was trying to decide whether to put somebody in jail and for how long, I thought a lot about how much it cost and what the benefit would be. For most people, maybe not most people, a lot of the people, no jail at all, a fine. They're humiliated to be there, and they're ashamed. And most of these people you'll never see again. It's the ones that have a second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh time over and over again. And those kind of people you try to reason with, and obviously, if it's a number of times they've been convicted, reasoning isn't working. So I call it training. They need trained with negative things and good things. And if that doesn't work, jail. And some people, folks, honestly, they not only deserve to be in prison, it's important for the community, our safety. These are unsafe people to be in our community. And that's what a judge does. Every time in a criminal case, he's weighing that and trying to decide what is best for the community, what's best for him. And remember, in a criminal case, there's a victim and their family, and then there's the defendant and their family. And they're all upset, and they're all rooting for their person. And a judge has to make a decision based on the law. Courts, of course, do estates, administrative estates, guardians for when people get infirm and need help. commit people for mental illness. And I want to add on mental illness, folks, one reason why you see people clearly that are mentally ill on our streets and walking around, and you wonder, why aren't they in a hospital? In America, you have a right to be mentally ill. You do. So long as you are not an immediate danger to yourself or somebody else. And it's very hard to commit somebody. It really is. And maybe should be. I don't know. That's up to the legislature. Torts. Torts is a fancy word for wrong. And that's the civil side where people sue each other. You notice most of you have a handout that I gave you. And I thought that was, to me, so interesting, because one of the questions people almost always ask me, either at a party or something like this, how about that McDonald's case? Or O.J. Simpson? And I'll talk to you if you want about both of those. But those, what I wanted to show you, that's a 20-year list of cases from Multnomah County. All the lawsuits in torts that were filed. And folks, there's a lot of zeros there. I think our juries really, really, really do a good job. You know, for most wrongs, or automobile accident or some other kind of tort, liability, sometimes it is argued, but really the issue, oftentimes, what makes them hard to settle sometimes, are pain and suffering. I don't know how to measure pain and suffering. I had a juror in Yamhill County once saying, it was on a whiplash case. And during voir dire, which is questioning the jury, they were asking him about, one of the male jurors, about, do you ever get pain and suffering? And he goes, my back and neck hurts every day, and I go to work. Well, clearly, he got kicked off the jury. But my point is, of course, lots of people feel that way. I kind of feel that way. And so jurors should be very, very, and they are, very, very suspicious of pain and suffering. Medicals are easy. You got bills. You got a doctor talking about it. You get reimbursed for medicals. And lost wages. But the pain and suffering. But I think in there you'll see the offers that were made, and the counter offers, and what a jury eventually did. I just thought you might find that interesting. What I have learned as a lawyer and a judge. Most of the people that come before me on the criminal side are not evil people. They've made a mistake. They drank too much. They got in a fight. They got jealous, full of passion, a momentary lapse of good judgment. That's what I see. Now, there's also people, I call them con men. I think you all know what con men are. I don't like to use the word evil, but that's as close to one as I can get. And what a con man is intentionally defraud a fellow citizen, knowingly, with a forethought, and oftentimes, almost always, absolutely no regret, other than they got caught. You can tell I was pretty tough on con men. I was maybe sometimes too soft on people that committed a crime of passion. I also made mention of this, that I learned that most people, again, can start over. I'm a man of hope. And I would often say that to defendants. We're starting over. You can change. I know you can change. I learned that, I don't know why I even ever questioned this, but even people that did not treat their children right, or because of crimes they haven't supported, or they have 6 kids and 6 mothers and they don't support their kids, but they still love their children. Maybe not like you and I do. I would always try to appeal to them as a parent, a father, a mother. And sometimes I could tell that worked. Sometimes you'd get a blank look and they didn't know what I was talking about. I also learned, and this is fundamental from everything really, when it comes to right and wrong, there are no double standards in the law, nor should there be in our lives. No double standards. Criminals, or I should say antisocial people, they think the world revolves around them. They absolutely believe in double standards. And this is one of my pet little theories. My wife's a psychologist, and she's not so sure I'm right, but when I have a cigar, she gives me hell about it. And I said, honey, a cigar is just a cigar. Okay. Anyway, if you've read Freud, you know what I'm talking about. Here's my pet theory. Almost all crime and evil in the world is caused by anxiety. Just think about that for a while. And when you really investigate and look at why somebody did something, it's anxiety. Some of the most anxious people I've ever met in my life are people who have been in and out of prison all their lives. They are extremely anxious people. And what do people do? Raise your hand if you can answer this. What do most people do? Most people do when they get anxious. It's not, which you're maybe a little ashamed of. They do something stupid. I'll speak for my gender. We men, we get angry. Shout. I tell my wife, I don't shout, I just raise my voice. And folks, that does not lead to good things. Anger. When I was in the service, they used it. When I played football, they used anger. That's what coaches and so forth would use us to get over our fear, attack the beach, or attack the football field. So anger can be beneficial a little bit, but most of it's toxic and leads to no good. And of course, another thing people do for anxiety is take drugs. I heard, I saw a documentary the other day about the Grateful Dead, and Garcia, I think he was the guitarist, well, he was a heroin addict. And he was telling one of his band persons that why he did it. He said, for that moment of time, I felt nothing but bliss, zero anxiety. And folks, when I've talked to addicts, and it could be alcohol or almost any drug, they're taking it because it reduces anxiety. And their life is full of anxiety. They don't have a job. They can't keep a job once they start taking drugs. Their life is in chaos. These things all cause anxiety. I don't know the solution, but I will tell you, when people meditate or pray, they're not anxious. They don't commit crimes. So if people can learn how to live a life of comfort and joy, a life of peace and tranquility, the chances of a crime are virtually zero. It's ironic. I don't know if that's the right word, but people who have been in prison will say, I kind of like prison. I mean, I'd rather be out, but prison is kind of a safe place for me. And I never got that until I had a dog that was very anxious every time lightning, or guns would go off. And then I found a solution. I'd put that little sweetheart dog on a leash and command her to sit. Immediately, she would calm down. I think you get the picture. Really, same thing when I was in boot camp. No, boot camp wasn't fun. It was hard, but it wasn't stressful. It was sort of a peaceful time, other than when they were screaming at you in your face. Okay, a couple questions. What time is it? What are we doing here? Real quick, because I want to give questions. People, here's your chance to ask a judge any question you want. But this one I want to talk to right off the bat. I've been asked this 100 times. How, as a lawyer, can you lie for a client? And I've already talked about my view about lawyers lying. And you know, folks, yes, I've represented plenty of people that I had a pretty good suspicion they were guilty. But that's not what lawyers do. There's a constitution here. And that all of us deserve presumption of innocence, a right to a trial, a right to subpoena witnesses on their own behalf, right to cross-examine witnesses. Now, if a client told me he did it, I wouldn't allow him to take the stand. I would be assisting a crime. So I've had to actually resign from cases because I had a client told me he in fact did it, but wanted to take the stand to deny it. I'm not unique. That's what lawyers do. Now, I didn't always ask them whether they did it. I was their lawyer. But I just wanted to talk about that and emphasize that again. I was proud to represent people, and I didn't have a problem. I mean, there were some classes of crimes that I would have given anything not to have represented them, but I was appointed, had to do my duty, and I did. Another question. Do the rich get more justice than the poor? And my answer is almost none. No. Assuming the lawyers for both sides are competent. You don't have to be F. Lee Bailey. Most of you know who that is. That was a famous lawyer when I was growing up. You don't have to be F. Lee Bailey to win a lot of cases. You have to be prepared, and you have to have the facts on your side. And you have to be persuasive to the judge regarding the law. And you don't have to be rich to hire a lawyer that can do that very, very, very well. Just the other day, I was trying a case in Newport, and the issue came up of how to pick jurors. Rich people, or people that can afford it, will hire people to help them pick a jury. And the question was, and I was talking with a couple lawyers about this, you know, I mean, I picked a lot of juries as a lawyer, and I've watched many, many, many juries picked as a judge. I'm in the closest of cases, probably it would help, but it's not rocket science. I mean, you know, you ask jurors questions, and their biases come out. And just because they're biased doesn't mean they're not going to be a good juror, but so long as they recognize their bias and then can do the right thing. I've already talked about elected judges. You know my feeling on that. I'll also ask all the time about the death penalty. And I can speak a little more freely about that because the chances of me being on a death penalty case is about zero. I'm a Plan B judge now. If it was up for a vote, I'd vote no. As a judge, I do my duty. And folks, it's not that many people don't deserve to die for their crime. There are some horrendous, horrible crimes that I don't believe they deserve another breath. But here's the issue, and lawyers all know this. It's so easy to make a mistake. It happens all the time. On this type of case, where there's eyewitness testimony. And most of the cases you hear that are overturned 20 years later, and 30 years later, and 20 years later, it's because of DNA. We have DNA evidence now. And the conviction was based on eyewitness testimony. And folks, I'll just tell you, as human beings, we don't always see what we really think we're seeing. So there's no appeal from death. So I believe life imprisonment for the worst cases and not the death penalty. But that's my view. Again, though, as a judge, I would have done my duty. I would have followed the law. I think maybe there's a good time for some questions, and then after some questions, I do have some conclusion remarks. Any questions? Anybody here? Yes, ma'am.
Were you ever affected in your career as an attorney or as a judge by mandatory minimum restrictions?
Oh, you mean mandatory sentencing? Yeah. Well, I'm not going to speak for my colleagues, but I never liked it. It was power away from the judge, and it gives it to the district attorney, even though we have a very good district attorney. And the legislature would determine these things. I just think I don't like mandatory sentences.
So you were.
Well, I had to follow the law. When there was minimum sentences, I did it.
Yeah, and yet you didn't particularly think it was.
Sometimes it was, well, most of the time I thought it was very just, most of the time, but there's always exceptions. There's exceptions. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Please use the microphone for the question.
Thank you. That's a good point. Yes, we'll try to do that. There's, Ossie's got it. There we go. Ossie has a mic. Any other questions?
I have one. You mentioned about how you have to make decisions every day.
Yes.
Did it get easier throughout your career to make those decisions, both professionally, your ability to, but then also emotionally on some of the harder days?
It did. It was when I was a brand new judge. It was very difficult, and I'd go home and stew about stuff and question myself, and you just can't be a judge very long if you do that. You have to have confidence that you're going to use all the evidence in a considered decision, make the decision, next case. And I hardly ever, I just very seldom ever second guessed myself. There were many exceptions, but not that many. And it got less and less and less as I got more and more experience. Gary?
Two questions, Ronald. I'm a former attorney for everybody that doesn't know me here. Practiced for 30 years in Yamhill County. So I have a little bit of perspective on this, but just from your point of view, equal access to the law. You know that it can make a difference how much one side or the other has to spend for services. An attorney can bombard another attorney with paper, basically, and make it very difficult to carry on a case. Just for an example, say you take on Amazon in local court. Do you not think that it would make a big difference in trying to take on a corporation like that, or some other entity that has unlimited resources? And is it the job of a judge to make sure that there's equal opportunity to present a case?
Well, it is an obligation of a judge to make sure there's equal opportunity to present a case. And you're right, Gary. A large corporation they have these. They get sued all the time for the same thing, so they have just reams of these motions, and you got to just be prepared. They have a right to do that. If it is oppressive, you can ask the judge for relief, and hopefully, some of these cases you can get attorney fees. But you're right, Gary. In those kind of cases, your lawyer better be prepared, and it's going to cost you a fair amount of money to sue him because it's going to be a fairly expensive case. We're talking about torts. We're talking about civil cases.
I'm talking about family law as well.
And family law. Well, family law, to some extent, but the judge has more control in family law, and honestly, I would be very, very sympathetic. I'd know right away what was going on, and a lawyer can ask for relief. In family law, they get priority on the docket, so they move along pretty quickly. But when child custody case comes up, then if you have a lot of money, you can hire all the psychologists and stuff, and it takes time. But I just think, when you don't have a lot of money, you just want to get in front of a judge as fast as you can. But you have a point, Gary, on that.
So my second question is, if you were king rather than a retired judge, do you have some kind of idea of what you would do to improve the system?
Not much. I do have a couple suggestions. One, in any child custody case, or anything to do with children, I would make sure, at public expense if necessary, a social worker should be appointed to help gather, especially when there's pro se, no lawyers, to help gather the information and give a report, like they do in juvenile court. and the juvenile department gives you a report based on their investigations and would be psychological testing and so forth. Because many times in pro se cases, no lawyers, and they're scheduled, they don't know how to try a case, and they're fighting over children. A social worker who would prepare a report would be very, very beneficial to the court. The second thing I would do is, I told you the benefit, particularly large corporations have on the fact we enforce contracts. They'll go to court over, a $10 million, $100 million contract. Folks, they pay the same filing fee you and I do. I think when you're suing somebody for money, the filing fee should be somehow proportionate to that amount. So the higher amount you want as a remedy, the higher your filing fee. I think that would help fund the courts and help people pay really for this tremendous service we give to particularly very, 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 very wealthy corporations that can afford to pay rather than $200. What is our filing fees? At $250? $250. They should be paying thousands when they're suing for millions, in my opinion. Other than that, honestly, folks, I mean it. The system really does work. My colleagues and I, all these years, day in, day out, deciding decisions facing families, criminals, and I think we did it really, really, really well. And we're not the only county. I'm now as a Plan B judge, I've been going around to different counties. I'm so impressed with how the courts are run and how dedicated the judges are to their job, and the lawyers and the personnel that work there. It's just, if you folks could see it, I know you would be pleased as citizens. You're getting your money's worth, folks. I mean it. And I'm not up for election ever again, so I'm just telling you the way I see it. Really, you get your money's worth and a lot more. I really don't have any other really major decisions. I wish we had one more judge here in this county. I wish I think the DA could use one more person. And I think, I kind of have selfish reasons. I think defense lawyers probably should get paid a little more. And a lot of you know why I'm saying that. Aaron. My son is a defense lawyer. So that.
We would have afforded it if we didn't pay so much out for hers.
Next question. Yes, sir.
As a former lawyer, I agree with you about the Yamhill County, but I was wondering if you saw the documentary Hot Coffee. The lawyer from Ashland who was behind that was here as speaker to City Club.
I saw that.
He made some very persuasive arguments about the dangers of electing buying judges is what it came down to in elections. And I just wondered, having seen that, if you had any comments.
I totally disagreed with her. I was at that talk, and folks, this kind of leads me to my conclusion. One of my conclusions here, that question. I just think they're absolutely wrong. If I thought a judge was bought, I don't know. I would do something about it. Judges. The courts are under attack now, have been particularly, not only just juries, but courts, as if we're political bodies, or we're the Republicans or Democrats, or who appointed us. Folks, in the vast majority of these things, it makes absolutely no difference. Now, yes, for the Supreme Court it does, because they're making decisions based on the Constitution, and there's different theories of the Constitution which could have tremendous effect on certain policies that you agree with or don't agree with. And that's the way it should be. But anywhere from the Supreme Court down, honestly, it doesn't make any difference whether you're a Republican or Democrat. It doesn't make any difference whether you're a liberal or a conservative. They have to follow the law. And if they don't follow the law, there's an appeal. I got appealed all the time. All the time. These guys do too. It's just part of the deal. And it should be. It's not just us speaking. So to answer your question, I disagreed with her on that. And now, you know, I had a friend that practiced law in Chicago, and there were like 4 judges that got arrested while it was a couple years ago, that were taking money in parking tickets or some stupid thing. Well, okay, obviously that stuff can go on. And if they would do that, you'd wonder what else they did. But in my experience here in Oregon, I don't think any judges are bought. And that's my opinion, but I think it's informed.
I have one last question here. Being a psychologist too, I am very proud of you. The mental health courts and the kinds of different things that we offer here, I think they're so very, very important. I just wanted to throw that out. I think you made a comment on that.
Well, I think it really does service to our folks. I'm going to make a conclusion here, and then there may be a time for a few more questions. And this goes back to, you know, civilization is a thin veneer over our most base and primitive emotions. If it wasn't for civilization, it'd be might makes right, and it would be, well, what human beings have lived in most of their history. So when I hear public officials or people undermining our court system because they disagreed with an opinion, I just can hardly stand it. Folks, justice is not synonymous with winning a case. Justice is not personal. Just because you lost doesn't mean you didn't have justice, legal justice. And I don't know, that you just hear this over and over again. Justice, legal justice, is the fulfillment of the law. If you got due process and you lost, you had legal justice, even though maybe you couldn't get enough evidence in, maybe the jury didn't believe you, and maybe you should have won. And if God was there, maybe he would make sure you won. But we're human, and all we can give you is due process. All we can do is, justice is not synonymous with power, rather with what is right in a social context. And what is right in a social context is synonymous with either morality, the law, or revealed truth, not with your win or lose. Any more questions? And I got one more little sentence to say. Surely there's got to be something here you've always wanted to ask a judge. Okay.
When you looked at the couple, is this on?
Oh, yeah,
When you looked at the couple during a marriage ceremony, did you get better at figuring out which ones were coming back for divorce?
Actually, I think I did. It's all anecdotal. But, you know, if one, they didn't look each other in the eye. To me, that was a dead giveaway. They wouldn't look each other in the eye. To me, that was a dead giveaway. And if they weren't, I don't know, people are honeymooning, they're touching, and they can't keep their hands off each other, and the room fills with their love and when it's not there, I just think they're toast. And they're getting married for some other reason, so I don't know. That's the best way I can answer that. It's 1 o'clock. Anything else? All right, last thing I want to say is thank you so much for inviting me. And folks, thank you for supporting our courts. I've been a lawyer for 42 years, a judge for 18. I want to thank all of you. If you get a chance to serve on juries, please do your duty. Do it in there, go in there. Bring your good common sense in that jury room. And help us all serve justice. And may you serve justice all your lives. And I pledge to you today that I will continue to serve justice until the day I die. Thank you very much.
A bottle of J.L. Pinot Noir from one of our sponsors. I'm sure it goes good with the next cigar. And thank you again for presentation today and all the years of service. Thank you.